A federal judge blocked the deployment of the National Guard to Oregon, and Illinois and Chicago are suing the Trump administration over the deployment of the National Guard. Let's bring in former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick. A lot of the headlines over the weekend spilling over to this week. There is a clash between federal and state authority, which we have discussed, John. But what is your assessment of the current situation? Do you see anything unlawful?
So, Dee, we've got another separation of powers showdown. The Trump team says, look, when he calls up the National Guard, it's within his discretion as president. He thinks there's a rebellion. He thinks he needs to protect the ICE agents and federal property. The state authorities say, hey, look, we've got this under control. Crime is going down. We don't need you. Ultimately, I think the Trump team is going to prevail in these arguments. I think the Supreme Court is going to find that the president makes these calls, not a court, not a judge. The president decides if he needs to call the National Guard. It's basically within his discretion. He's our commander in chief. He's in charge of keeping the country safe, not a particular judge in a particular locality. So eventually, Trump is going to prevail in this dispute. There's going to be a lot of skirmishes with a lot of different judges, but ultimately, the highest court in the land is going to rule in his favor.
And this is concerning, bringing in the National Guard. But when you assess the presence already there, I want to play for you a clip from Chicago's police superintendent today. He was speaking of his officers' response in light of the federal immigration crackdown. Listen.
Sometimes there's a struggle when you're walking that line to make sure that you're not violating either one of those things, and at the same time enforcing the law the way that we're supposed to. One thing about law enforcement, I'll tell you this right now, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But we accept that.
So when you have violent scenes like we did over the weekend in Chicago, can you clarify the role of an officer, a police officer versus a federal agent, and if there are any exceptions to the Illinois Trust Act, which came up today?
Yeah, so Dee, the Illinois Trust Act basically says that local law enforcement are not supposed to help ICE agents if they're doing a civil procedure, in other words, a civil detention order for a particular illegal immigrant in Chicago. But if there's a crime being committed, if ICE agents are under siege by citizens in that community, absolutely, law enforcement needs to go to their aid. Local and state law enforcement needs to go to their aid. Law enforcement needs to cooperate. That's a great thing in this country. When it happens all over our country. But if there's a crime committed, law enforcement needs to go to the ICE agent's aid. If they're serving a civil warrant, they don't go to assist them with that.
Only got about 30 seconds. There's been a lot of reaction pouring in over the sentence for Justin Kavanaugh's would-be assassin. Do you believe that 8-year prison sentence was insufficient, as Attorney General Pam Bondi put it?
Yeah, Justice Kavanaugh, is on the United States Supreme Court. Whenever you threaten to kill a justice, that's a very, very serious crime. I think, like most folks, I think he should have gotten a much heavier sentence. DOJ is going to appeal, but that's a challenge. We give a lot of discretion to judges in the sentencing. They're going to appeal. He obviously got a sentence that was way low, but will it increase on appeal? I think it's going to be a challenge for DOJ to overturn that, but there's a lot of frustration out there with that, what is perceived as a very light sentence.
All right, former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick, as always, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk.